I have a love-hate relationship with our multifamily properties. I'm going to talk about that today. Hey guys, if you're new here, my name is Alex Wislowski, and over the last 3 years, I've scaled a portfolio to over 70 units with my teammate from college. We've bought everything from single family, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, 7plex little apartment units, and most importantly, the property I'm going to talk about today, our 13-unit apartment building. Today, I'm breaking down the real pros and cons of multifamily housing, and I'm going to be showing you our 13-unit apartment building. And I'm going to talk about why we might be pulling the trigger on selling it. The first and most obvious pro. You're still okay. The first most obvious thing is vacancy. A big concern I get from new investors when they're buying single family is, oh my gosh, like what if it's vacant? Like what do I do? And they'll tell me that the reason they're so much more interested in multifamily housing is because, well, if it's multi-units and one unit's vacant, then I still have rental income coming in, which is true. You have more units, you can handle, you're more durable, your cash flow is more durable if somebody moves out. If 2, 3 people move out, but you have a 20-unit apartment building, you're fine, you do not care. So that is pro number 1. Right out the door, you get enough volume of units and tenants so that if someone moves out, you are not immediately trashed, your cash flow is not immediately trashed. If you are a single family investor and you have 2 houses and one goes vacant, then 50% of your cash flow is gone. Now, the reason why this isn't as big of a pro to us anymore is because if you follow the Burr method and you buy enough single family houses, eventually your portfolio starts moving like a multifamily portfolio. If you buy enough single family houses, you get that pro too. It's just volume. Con, going right off of this. Tenant turnover. Think back to the times you've lived in multifamily housing in your life. It was probably when you were in college or in a transitionary place in life. You probably didn't live there for more than 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 years. That is an overlooked con of multifamily real estate, is that you'll have higher tenant turnover. And every time a tenant moves out, there's going to be costs associated with that in order for you to make the unit ready. And it'll also be vacant for that period of time. So multifamily real estate has higher vacancy rate, even though, yes, you have more units, so you're less vulnerable to vacancy. The percentage of your units that are going to be vacant, if you had, say, 10 units in an apartment building versus 10 single family houses, it's going to be higher in the multifamily property for those 10 individual units than your 10 houses. People move into houses and they commit to live there for a longer period of time, generally 3 to 5 years in our portfolio. Multifamily, those 10 units, most of those people are going to be gone in under 2 years. So what that means is you constantly have people going in and out, moving in and out, and they will not always leave it in make-ready condition. So you'll have to spend money to make it ready. Not only money, but that's more management oversight, managing move-ins, move-out. So it's more strain on your property manager or yourself if you're managing it yourself. When you average occupancy for the entire year, it's going to be lower on your multifamily units than your single family housing. So even though the single family housing, you may be more vulnerable to if one person moves out, that one property's vacancy rate drops to 0, but vacancy is going to be lower year round, year after year. This is one of the main reasons why we are wanting to get rid of our apartment building, is because it is a constant pain for our property manager to have to go in, and it's low income, so they didn't leave the property in good shape, their unit in good shape. So she has to then get a crew out there, and we're having to spend money to repair it and get it ready to go and then list it on the market again. So not only is it vacant, but we're spending money to make it ready again. This is a pro for multifamily, the value add. Multifamily properties are worth more. When you put work into them, your value add swings can be much greater than an individual single family house, and the extra work required is not proportionally greater than the return you get compared to single family housing. What do I mean by that? The effort it would take to create the same amount of equity in improving one multifamily property and raising rents at one multifamily property, that value created by doing either one of those things, raising the rents or improving it, the value created, the equity created, you would need to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 houses in order to create that same amount of equity. Now, the remodel might be more extensive. The raising rent process might take longer, be more drawn out, but the effort to create that same amount of equity in 10 houses is far greater than doing it at one multifamily dwelling. We realized this with our first commercial property, where the remodel and the actual effort to improve the property really wasn't that much worse than our single family houses, but the equity jumps were so much greater. So our first experience with this was actually with our office, 513 Southwest. If you take a 13-unit apartment building and you raise all the rents by $200, that is a tremendous amount of value created. And then if you say replace the roof for the entire property or upgrade all the units, it's one site, so it's easier to manage the remodel, and the value created is gonna be a big swing. So the last con and the main reason we're considering selling our apartment building is they're harder to get your cash out of, they're harder to refinance, and you're subject to higher interest rates. I'm just gonna narrate right here so it makes a little bit more sense, but this is me putting money into an apartment building, trying to get my money out, and being told, nope, you can only pull out 60%, nope, 50% of the market value. 3 months ago, we went to try and refinance it like you typically would with the BRRRR method. With our houses, we get 75 all the way up to 80% loan to value on the cash out refi. Loan to value meaning if the place is worth 100,000, you can pull out 75,000, 75% of 100,000. For our apartment building, we thought it would be the same thing. However, our DSCR lender sent us back the quotes that she was getting from lenders. At first, she was saying it was going to be 60% loan to value, which sucks. We were going to try to make it work, but it still sucked. 60% loan to value, like, are you kidding me? The second thing was she actually came back to us and said they'll only do 50% loan to value. The part that stopped us was the fact that because it's 13 units, it is classified as commercial multifamily, so it's subject to higher interest rates. The lowest rate we got quoted was still over 10%. For most investors, this would have really stopped growth if you could only pull out 50 or 60% of the market value. That would have meant that you probably would have had some cash tied up. And even if you did refinance, you'd be subject to higher interest rates. So for that reason, I do not believe that multifamily in 2026 scales with the BRRRR method like single family houses do. What we are finding in talking to more lenders is that lenders for some reason are really not wanting to lend on multifamily as much these days. And with the BRRRR method, the speed in which you can pull your capital out of deals and recycle capital is a huge determining factor on how quickly you scale your portfolio. If you're going after just multifamily and you're only able to pull out most but not all the cash you put in, and it's going to be at a higher interest rate, I do not believe it is as scalable as buying single family houses. Our biggest areas of pain with our apartment building right now is the turnover, the constant turnover of people moving in and out and us having to do repairs, and the fact that we can only pull out 50% of the market value, so we'll have 50% equity left in the deal, which isn't bad for cash flow reasons. It would leave it as a good cash flowing property. However, we are more so motivated to sell because the opportunity cost of that cash, what it could do if we put it into houses at the speed we can recycle capital. But anyways, let's go check out the property. I actually got to grab something to eat first because it's going to be a long drive since I live an hour outside of the market we invest in. So just one sec. It's starting to look pretty gray out. I'm hoping we don't get rained out. Rain isn't supposed to come until 2. It's 10 o'clock right now. So fingers crossed we don't get rained out. So here's the story on how we got this apartment building for 220 grand. If you've been following me for a while, you know that Antonia and I got started in real estate by wholesaling while we were in college wrestling. And this was gonna be our biggest wholesale deal ever. We were gonna make a $60,000 wholesale fee. While I was in the attic of our second property we ever purchased, that was a triplex, I got a phone call from the buyer basically saying they're not going through with it because they checked out the property and they thought it was too rough for them to close on it and be able to be all in at the price they needed to. So here I was in the attic of our second property we ever bought. It was a single family with a duplex in the back. I was rerunning the electrical because turns out that property had gas leaks. So I was actually switching everything over to electrical, and I was up there with my other college wrestling teammate. And then I got a phone call saying basically that $60,000 wholesale fee I thought we were gonna make, clipped, not making it. So what did Antonio and I do? First of all, I'm in the garage right now because I was gonna try to get some shots outside of the property. There's a good amount of riffraff right now and people are just home, and apparently we're going through an eviction on one of the units. So me standing out front talking about how much money we have made or make off this property, or talking about buying and selling the property in front of people who are here, which it's like 11 o'clock on a Monday, and normally people would be at work, but with this type of housing, got a lot of people on disability or benefits or whatever. So that's another reason and why we're wanting to get rid of this place is that, look, housing like this, people are always home. So they're always using the appliances and parts of the unit that cause issues and require work orders. They're always using it. They're always living in it. Whereas a single family, you have people who go away, they go to work, they come back, or here, military base, they're stationed. So the house is just sitting vacant, not getting used. Here, people live here nonstop because they're on benefits or on disability. So they're never going to work. So they're using everything and everything's getting abused. So a lot of work orders. But anyways, what did Antonio and I do when we found out we were not going to be making a $60,000 wholesale fee? By the way, this is our garage here at the apartments, and we use it for storage while we're doing remodels. So that's one thing that's like kind of nice about this place and really makes up for some of the headaches, is that we have all this storage for our remodels. And Tony and I, after we found out we were not going to be making that $60 wholesale fee, it was the day before closing, we panicked and we just started calling everyone we knew. Wrestling team donors, people we've done business with, other buyers, anybody we could in our contacts. Eventually, we were able to get private funding to close on this deal with an out-of-state investor as a partner, and we didn't even have to delay closing. What that meant was we bought this at our wholesale price with that partner, and it meant that our fourth real estate deal ever was this 13-unit apartment building. Look at all this flooring. At the time, we had no property manager, no GC, and for remodels, we were just calling up Gabriel and being like, hey, can you do this work? He'd say yes, and he'd say a price, and that was it. No contracts, no structure, no anything. With this apartment complex, the day after we closed, I came out here and I did the first thing that made logical sense. We have to break into all units and assess the condition. So for context, we were not able to access all of the units. Only 3 were occupied, and the majority of the units we could not secure access to before closing. And that was part of the reason why the buyer ended up not closing on it, because he did not feel confident enough in the condition of all the units based on photos or what we had seen of the units that were accessible. The first thing I did was come out here with an axe to chop down, break in to all the units that were vacant, assess the condition, and then swap the locks. That seemed like the logical next first steps. How the heck are we going to take this 13-unit apartment complex from where it was to occupied and producing income? All I knew was we got to get into all the units. So I did that, and good news was most units were in decent condition, except for one that needed a complete top to bottom remodel. And I remember I spent an entire day breaking in and then going to Home Depot, getting a door, getting a lock, and installing it myself. And that was before I really understood the concept of buying back your time and leverage. So I was like, it's got to get done. Someone's got to do it. So I'm going to do it myself. I went to Home Depot a few times. I measured wrong, got the wrong door, drove back, tried to put the door up and it was the wrong size. And then so I drove back to Home Depot and had to replace it. And it was just a headache. It didn't matter though, because I was so excited that we got an apartment complex, even if it was with a partner. And even though I didn't know the headache and pain it was going to be, I was just so excited that we got into a project like this. I was excited to be a handyman, to be the property manager, to be doing all of it myself. But obviously I didn't do the full $120,000 remodel. So here was the scope of work. So real quick, you'll see on Instagram, I put the property purchase price at $280,000. That's because we still paid ourselves that $60,000 wholesale fee because one LLC purchased, one LLC for the wholesaling, me and Antonio for the wholesaling, me and Antonio partner for the LLC this property is purchased in. So we still paid ourselves that $60,000 wholesale fee, even though it was paying ourselves. 9 apartment flooring, just vinyl LVP flooring, $18,900. Interior paint, labor and material, $13,500. 25 water heaters. This is an area we didn't even check. We kept moving in people and then discovering that their water heaters were broken. So every time we move someone in, water heater. Water heaters at Home Depot, about $600. And then our labor was about for another 800 on top. We were definitely overpaying. A few of these were like those short ones that are harder to find. So I think it was a bit more than 600 on some of them. And then the install on a lot of them were a pain because of how old the water heaters were in this building. So it's a little bit of a pain for the guy installing it. So higher material costs there. Normally 600 material, 400 to 600 on labor. We were overpaying, didn't know what we were doing. HVAC, about $6,000 a unit, pretty small units. We drove up guys from Dallas to do the install. I was there for 2 of the 3 installs. I was actually helping. So $18,000 for the HVAC systems on 3 of the units. The other units, we stopped giving HVAC and we just went with window units. Plumbing, there's miscellaneous plumbing we had to repair on the units on the other side of the building I'm in. We had to rerun the supply line for the entire building. It was leaking. Only one repair had to do with the actual sewer line. Then electrical, more miscellaneous electrical. There are some old panels here and a lot of non-GFCI plugs, meaning we could not get these units approved for Section 8. When we wanted to get these approved for Section 8, we had to get all those plugs swapped over to GFCI and get everything up to code. So there's just a lot of miscellaneous electrical there. And then lastly, we had to do 1 full kitchen remodel. That was the unit that scared away the investor when he saw it, and 1 full bathroom remodel. Watching this back, I think it's really important that I clarify that these units are literally 550 square feet. So the kitchen and bathrooms were super tiny. These remodels, again, do not expect to be able to remodel a kitchen or bathroom for that price if it is a single family house. We got lucky with our labor costs, and at the time, there was definitely a lot of corners cut. So just take it with a grain of salt, these prices. And that brings our total to $106,200 according to my spreadsheet at the time. I was definitely not doing a good job bookkeeping because I was also the property manager and the GC and the handyman. So how good of an accountant could I have been? Probably not that good, but ballpark right about there. Okay, so not including our wholesale fee, that put us all in at... So not including our wholesale fee, that put us all in for this property about $326,000. 13 units, all in $326,000. Now, was that a good deal? I'm gonna break it down at the office. Real quick before we go to the office to break down the numbers, I'm gonna show you one of the units and talk a little bit about my property management experience. I have 1 unit vacant right now. We have 12 out of the 13 occupied, so I'm gonna show you the vacant one. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. I present to you what $550 a month gets you in Oklahoma. First of all, this unit is our last vacant unit. I think this is the only time since we've owned it where we've had more than 10 units occupied at a time. I'm glad we have at least 1 vacant so I can show you guys, but 12 out of the 13 occupied. Each one brings in between $550 and $650 per month. I won't get into the numbers here. We'll do that at the office next. Let me tell you guys some of the lessons I learned from actually this unit specifically. So for this apartment complex, I was our property manager. I listed them for rent. I met the tenants at the properties. I collected their rents. I set them up. I got them on the signed leases. This unit specifically, my tenant I moved in here was a single mom. She had 2 different baby daddies, and this tenant forever changed my willingness to trust people and my outlook on people in low-income situations. Let me explain. She had 2 baby daddies. They were both about 22, 24, so they were older and she was younger. So it was a really rough situation. So I cut her a break. When I moved her in, she had some iffy stuff on her credit and history and income verification, and I allowed her to move in without a full deposit. I charged her a $50 deposit and gave her half off in the first month of rent because, first of all, I just really wanted to get someone in, and also I felt bad for the situation she was in. If you got too much empathy and you do low income housing, you're not cut out for it. You need to fire yourself and hire a property manager day 1 if you're doing low income housing and you got a big heart. Not saying I have a big heart, but if you do, you're gonna get taken advantage of. So things were all right for about 2 months. She was paying on time and there wasn't any drama. But what started to happen was I would get reports from from the neighbors of screaming, banging, shouting, and just a lot of drama happening in this unit. I didn't know what to do at the time, so I would just politely tell her, hey, like, what's going on? I don't want to get the police involved. Like, can you please resolve it and be quiet? Well, so in the beginning, she was really chill with it. She's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'll be quieter, I'll be good, and all of that. Fast forward about another month, and she missed paying rent. And she was getting late. Basically, I was just asking her, almost begging her for rent, like, please, you gotta pay rent, like, you're overdue. And at first she was like, okay, like, I'll pay it. A week would go by, she wouldn't pay it. So then here we were around the 15th, still hasn't paid rent. So I send her a late fee, like, look, you're gonna have to pay a late fee. That is when she started accusing me of harassment and basically being like targeting her and all of this stuff because of the drama with the tenants. Just kind of threw a fit and she went off the defense on why she hadn't paid rent and went on the offense accusing me of things. And, oh, I had all these problems and you never fixed them. And like, I'm going to go after you for XYZ. And I never had her call me about problems, but it's because I was a green property manager. I didn't know that you need to keep track record and receipts on problems if they're reported or not, because then when you go to eviction court or if they take you to court, you have a receipt showing, hey, you requested a work order, I did it. You didn't request a work order, so I didn't do it. I didn't know that. And I thought because I was being so gracious with not going after her, trying to evict her, and I didn't file eviction on her even when she was 30 days late. I was just begging her to make a partial payment because when she started to get aggressive, I got terrified. I didn't want to get sued. It was one of my first times ever dealing with a problem tenant. What really broke me was the fact that when I did do repairs, I was doing repairs when she wasn't even paying rent, and I was personally doing the repairs. These were repairs I was having to look up how to do on YouTube. So I wasn't just sending people to do these repairs. I was personally doing it. So I was really emotionally involved with this property because my time, sweat, and effort, I was putting it into her unit, doing the best I could to be a good landlord. And in return, I was getting hit with not paying and attacks as far as, hey, not only am I gonna not pay rent, but I'm gonna go after you. And it terrified me. This air conditioner, for example, I installed myself. I carried it up the stairs. I got it out on the roof with a ladder. I had to like use the ladder as a bridge, and I had to install this heavy window unit for these people while they weren't even paying rent because their HVAC cut out. And so I installed a few of these while they weren't paying rent, and I was just sweating and I cut myself, and I was an idiot. I have countless stories of getting walked on by tenants. You'll see in later videos. This wasn't even the worst one. Honestly, there were so many more that were so much worse, but this was just one of the ones, and one that stung maybe a little more than others because I was personally really trying for these people and got taken advantage of. So now I completely remove myself from it because I don't have the heart and stomach to handle telling people they gotta move out or evicting them or being strict on collections. I cut people breaks. I listen to their stories. Our property manager now, she's strict with it. She doesn't play games, and I'm forever grateful that we made the switch when we did. I wish we did it sooner. This specific problem tenant was resolved when I handed everything off to a property manager. A property manager who knew the game that people in bad situations play, that people who know how to game not paying or game the court system, she knew how to play the games. So I removed myself from the problem, the situation, and our property manager, shout out Madison, she took care of it. And I got a lot of nasty texts freaking out from the tenant, basically because here comes Madison and she doesn't play around, and Madison took care of it. And I turned off my phone. The crazy part is this is just one of the many stories like this that I had to deal with as a property manager. And since the switch to an actual property manager, there's maybe one tenant that I ever moved in that's still in our properties across our entire portfolio because I'm such a bad property manager. And I got taken advantage of by a lot of tenants, and I didn't enforce things properly, and I fell for so many of the games that people play in low-income housing to not pay rent or scare their landlord. And there's actually tenants that target green landlords not using property managers because they know they can play those games. I'm not accusing this person of maybe doing that, but regardless, this tenant was a huge lesson in why you should outsource your property management and why you probably suck at property management if you're a new investor. By any means. Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you? I have an opening. She opened it, and then she told me to scan it to Lindsay, so I scanned it to Lindsay.
Okay, thank you. I have some stuff.
And I think maybe these. I get everybody's mail.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it never really has your name on it.
Okay.
And all the attorneys and.
Perfect. Thank
the
you.
mail lady.
Thank you. I'm gonna move this, get the lighting better. Who put the brakes on? I don't know how easily you can read this, but we were all in $326,000. Here is how you calculate your cash on cash return and cap rate of the property, and how I would assess both those numbers to determine if this is a good deal or not. And lastly, I'll say if this was a good deal or not. Rent right now is $550 to $650 per unit. 12 out of the 13 are occupied. So here's the current monthly rent. Just looked at our rent roll. I just jumped in Buildium at $67.50 per month. Hope that's readable, $67.50 per month. So I'm gonna talk about how it's doing now versus historical. So right now at $67.50 per month, that puts our cap rate at, to calculate cap rate for commercial, a quick way to do it is just take your monthly rent, divide it by 2, multiply by 12, divide by purchase price. Why am I dividing it by 2? Because I'm assuming half of rent goes to expenses. That includes maintenance and repair, vacancy, property management, and people not paying. So roughly, if this was day one of this deal, and this is what the rent roll was, this is how I'd underwrite it. Cap rate, that's gonna equal, I'll draw it out so you can see it, $6,750, $6,750 divided by 2 times 12. 12 months. We're basically assuming half of this goes to expenses, that's divided by 2, multiply it by 12 so we figure out the yearly cap rate, then dividing it by the all-in cost, which equals, okay, so I'll do it again, reps. How you get good at math? You do a lot of math problems. How you underwrite deals and be good at underwriting deals? You underwrite a lot of deals, so do it with me now. $6,750 is our current monthly rent. Divide that by 2. So assuming roughly $3,300 per month in cash flow. I am not including the mortgage. You do not include debt repayment in cap rate. We're talking about just the property itself as if it was bought in cash. Multiply by 12, okay? And then divide it by all-in cost, 326,200. So that puts us at a 12.5 cap. Not too bad. Really not too bad. Actually, if you go on LoopNet or you go on Zillow, anything, that is a fantastic deal. And it is. That's pretty good. And that's assuming 50% goes to expenses. We're hoping now that we've knocked out a lot of the major repairs and maintenance for the next couple of years that it stays 50% margin on this rent roll. So right now, 12 cap, that's pretty good on all in $326,000. Now, how do you figure out cash on cash return? Well, right now this is not termed out. Let me just give an example loan. So say this was financed with 20% down. Say you financed it for 20% down. Cash on cash return is going to be calculating the return on that 20% down. So to calculate the cash on cash return, after you divide this by 2, subtract out your monthly mortgage payment on this loan, okay? And then instead of dividing by the purchase price, you'll divide it by your 20% in. That's how you figure out your cash on cash return, and we like our cash on cash return to be a minimum of 15%. Now, with the BRRRR method, your cash on cash return for after you refinance, most of the time should be infinite. Because with the BRRRR method, and this ties into why we don't like multifamily, after you do the cash out refi, you should have 100% of your cash out of the deal. Cash on cash return is the return you're getting on your cash invested in the deal. So if you have no money invested in the deal, your cash on cash return is effectively infinite. Why we don't like multifamily as much? Because the loan to value, we have been quoted by most lenders, has been lower and therefore decreases our odds of being able to pull out all of our cash. Let me talk about how it's done historically and why we've been motivated to sell it. I pulled our 2025 average. I basically took for the whole year that I had in our Buildium and DoorLoop. So for context, when I was self-managing, I was using a software called DoorLoop, and we switched over to our property manager and she uses Buildium. These numbers might not be perfect, but they're really close. Again, bookkeeping, started early, started property one. I cringe so hard at the fact that I was not bookkeeping day one after the headaches it has caused us this year. But anyways, these numbers are pretty much accurate. Historically, this property has been a PITA. First of all, squatters. I posted about it on Instagram. We had a good amount of squatters while it was vacant. Every time we had squatters, we had to send someone out, board it up. So that cost us money and they caused damage. So we had to spend money on that. It also made it harder to rent it when you have squatters living in it, making the area look rough. That was the headache number one. Here is how this property performed in 2025. Taxes, $214 per month. Insurance, it was not $276 like when we bought it and we first underwrote it. It ended up being $435 per month. Vacancy rate, this was a huge area we underwrote incorrectly, and instead of it being a cost of $780 per month, or roughly 10% of what rent roll should be, that is not our rent roll, that is our average collected for every month. Rent roll should have been $7,800 per month. $7,800 per month, subtract out $780 to factor in 10% vacancy. This place was vacant for far more than 10% of the time. It averaged out to be $1,560 per month for vacancy rate. I'm watching this now and I just realized I didn't factor in collections. So the reason why you see $7,800, if you subtract out the vacancy rate I put in, does not equal $5,170. Collections, I was on average every month not collecting roughly $1,000 from tenants because I was not vetting people very well. So I was moving in just anybody. When I add up for the year of 2025 and averaged it, on average, there's $1,000 every month that went uncollected. Just people who didn't pay and I never got them to pay. That is a reflection on how bad of a property manager I truly was. So back to the video. Maintenance and repair, we thought it'd be $780. It was closer to $1,600 per month in maintenance and repair costs. Now, remember, we did a $106,000 remodel. So the fact that we're also spending this much money on maintenance and repair, just basically stuff to do with tenant turnover, tenants breaking things, and just the fact that the building was really old. Management fee, this is 8% of the monthly cash collected, and I just did an average. So for 2025, we averaged collecting $5,170 per month. There are 13 units. Each should have been occupied at $550 to $650 per month. So as you can see, that is the first blaring difference between how we're doing now to how we were. Subtract out all of these, and that left us with $2,400 per month in cash flow. Now this put it at a 9 cap, which is still great. It is great, but our whole pitch to the investor and our argument for why it was such a home run deal was that it was gonna be a 15 cap home run deal. Turns out low income, you gotta factor in higher vacancy rate, and especially if it's older, higher maintenance repair, but any multi-family housing is gonna have higher turnover, therefore more maintenance and repair, because when people move out, you gotta fix things. Does this make it a bad deal? No. By all means, it is still a great deal at a 9 cap, and especially for where it's at now today, it's doing great. However, I know just after seeing it today, there's gonna be more turnover coming up. We're gonna have more evictions. There's gonna be more headaches and repairs coming up soon because it's an older building. So even though right now, if the rest of the year it performed exactly like it is today, it'd be a fantastic deal. I know, because I know the historical performance of this deal, even with really great management. A bad month is right around the corner. And where we're at right now, the best we can do is pull out 60% loan to value, whereas if we sell it, we can move it all into single family houses. If you have any questions about how I underwrote this deal, please comment below. If you've been on the internet for any period of time in the real estate niche, I'm sure you've seen Grant Cardone talk about multifamily real estate and how it is the way to go. So I'm gonna end today's video by talking about how you can determine if multifamily or single family is better for you, depending on your situation and investment goals. I will also end by talking about our long play, our 10-year strategy for buying single family houses and what's next for us. I'm gonna finish up, do a few more hours of work here, and then I'll be back at home. I'll see you guys there. I wasn't gonna record anything till I got home, but then I got this from our CPA, and it's something I've talked about a lot in the school community and on other videos, our bookkeeping starting at day one, how bookkeeping actually became a bottleneck for us to scale. And this right here is our for in 2025, our P&L and income statements. And I just scanned it all over to Lindsay to start going through. Here's our general ledger. I might have to blur some of this out, but look at how many transactions there were for just 2025. 2025, this is the general ledger. All of these are transactions. Okay, look at this. These are all transactions just for 2025, and we were not bookkeeping on any of these. These are all pulled from bank statements and credit cards, and it's our general ledger. And you see how many thousands of transactions there are, and you can see that and understand. That is why our bill just for the last few months is so high for our accounting, because they've had to go through thousands of transactions to get us caught up. This is just so messy, and another reason why this is also messy is because we had so many different LLCs, an LLC for every single property. So this right here, I know that's not the point of this video, but I'm just to make a point. Like, please, 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 if you take away only one thing from all of my content, it's start your bookkeeping early and do it correctly, because reconciling a year or 2 years of thousands of bank transactions is either going to take up all of your time or it's going to be expensive to do. So if you are a real estate investor, stop what you're doing and right now click off this video and audit. How are you doing your bookkeeping? How are you doing your accounting? Start it now, please. For the love of the Lord, please do it now. But we're almost done with this. This is gonna get resolved hopefully within the next few weeks, and we'll be all caught up. And now going forward, we have a beautiful system thanks to our assistant, Lindsay, and we'll eventually be taking off of her plate and have a full-time bookkeeper, and then we'll just hire a CPA for filing for us. So accounting, so important. I like to work in a windowless office, no distractions. It's fantastic. Let's go home now. All right, so today we broke down the pros and cons of buying multifamily versus single family. The biggest ones being turnover. Turnover is going to be higher in multifamily housing. There's going to be expenses associated with it. Lending is going to be more difficult. Pros is volume. Volume, I'm going to dig into volume because this is really how you should determine if you should go into multifamily real estate or single family. I don't remember the content creator, but I recently saw a clip from a podcast of two investors who do the BRRRR method talking about how you should not buy a single rental property unless your intent is to get to 10. Why did he say this? He said this because investing in residential real estate doesn't start to make sense until you have the volume of about 10 houses. Why? Well, when you have one house, HVAC goes out. There goes your cash flow for 2 years. A tenant moves out. Your cash flow and your income become zero. So say you have $100,000 and you want to invest it in real estate and you're like, oh, I have some money in my stocks, I have some in my Roth, I'm gonna buy a single rental house. You're really exposed when you do that. You're exposed to the risk of vacancy and maintenance and repairs completely wiping out your positive cash flow for a few years. If you only buy one rental property, it won't feel like an investment, it'll feel more like a liability. However, once you reach 10 units, those 10 units stabilize themselves so where if you do have to replace a single HVAC, you have enough income coming from all those houses and you have enough equity that you can tap into to build reserves, cash reserves. So what do I mean by that? If you bought in 10 houses, every refinance going to the next house, you should be parking cash into an account for reserves. So when you're at 10 houses, you should have a cash reserves account that you've built naturally by following the BRRRR method and setting aside funds for reserve for things like HVAC. You only get that big account with reserves by doing the BRRRR method up to 10 houses, and you have enough of that cushion for if one of those houses has HVAC repair, not only do you have the income coming in to make it not sting as much, but you should have reserves because the process of going from 1 to 10, you should build up that reserve account. The other thing is if you have 8 houses and 2 of them are vacant, okay, you're still at 80% occupancy, you're stable. So if you're thinking, hey, I got all this money and I want to invest in real estate, but I really don't want to commit to buying 10 houses, you, my friend, might actually be better suited to buy multifamily real estate. Why? You got the volume day one. When you buy a multifamily property, it comes with the unit volume to combat the vacancy issue and the repair issues. If one of the units out of 10, you got to replace the HVAC, it's only 10% of your doors needing AC work versus 100% because your first one. I'll leave it at that. If you are trying to figure out if you should buy single family or multifamily, how committed are you to scaling doors? If you don't want to be that involved and you don't want to focus on the BRRRR method and you just want to park your cash into something, you should go the multifamily route. Now, I will say for us, we probably won't buy another multifamily property unless it is more high-end or really well maintained or a newer build. This is what our exit strategy is with all of these houses. We want to get to around 1,000 houses, then either start leveraging them or selling them off and 1031ing that cash into triple net commercial properties. For us, we don't see a point in moving from single family to multifamily just because we know the problems that will come with owning multifamily are still similar enough to the single family houses, that it's not really that much of an upgrade for us. Yes, you get the volume and scale because you can do much more money parked into one address. We'd rather just go straight from single family to commercial. And also the value add on single family for us is so repeatable now, because when you start doing the BRRRR method and you get really good at it because you have a team that is sourcing the deals, remodeling the deals, and managing the deals, you're doing BRRRR deals almost passively. Where we are at today, we are doing BRRRR deals on autopilot pretty much. So our portfolio is scaling on autopilot. If we were to jump into multifamily, it'd be learning a new game, and it'd be something I would not be as confident letting it run on autopilot. See, when you're buying houses and you're buying multiple houses every month, it eventually becomes a system that is repeatable and you can train people on, and it's not super talent dependent. Whereas multifamily, you got to have a little bit higher IQ to do the value adds. They're harder to find, they're harder to source. For us, I would have to be much more involved in our real estate portfolio if we were doing the multifamily route. So that's why we're just going to let our portfolio get up to 1,000 doors, leverage, sell off, and park it in triple net commercial. Triple net is the most passive form of real estate investing, and that's the direction we're gonna go. That's all I got for today. If you want to do a deal or a few deals with me, please click the link below. Other than that, join our free school community. It's in my Instagram bio, or I will link it below. Like and subscribe, comment if you got any questions and what you want to see more of. One more thing before I end. Do we regret buying this apartment complex? No. We learned a lot. Would we do it again? Absolutely. The lessons we learned were so valuable, and we bit off more than we can chew, and we learned how to chew it. So for that, I am grateful. It also allowed me to confidently speak on my opinion on multifamily housing, because I feel like it's really overhyped these days because of Grant Cardone, and actually owning not only that apartment complex, but a 7-plex. I can confidently speak on what it's like owning multifamily. So I feel confident in explaining why we invest in what we invest in and giving advice on what you should be buying if you are getting into real estate. Anyways, thanks guys. Please like and subscribe. Bye.